Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, very recently, Russia announced that it's postponing indefinitely further discussions on the New START treaty with the United States. The reason it says, we've got things on our plate at the moment, and this isn't the right time for discussing the matter. This has caused great anguish among the kind of do-gooder, liberal, disarmament, arms control, fetishists, particularly those ensconced at responsible statecraft. So there's an article that appeared today on responsible statecraft attacking Russia for not going ahead with this meeting. Now, Peter, you and I are in favor of arms control. On the other hand, we're not in favor of arms control fetishism, where arms control is just somehow separated from every other issue. And so this is a very good example of that kind of. Let me just show you what's in here. So here, this is the headline: Russia's self-defeating move in pausing nuke talks with the US. And as Moscow appears to be trying to pressure Washington on Ukraine, but abandoning New START would carry wider security risks.
Well, according to whom? For whom?
Exactly. and then Russia's announcement that it would postpone arms control talks with the United States was yet another signal that its current leadership is choosing a path detrimental to arms control, de-escalation, and peace. So this is what I mean by the fetishist. You ignore everything else that's going on. The Ukraine, the brinkmanship that essentially that NATO, United States are engaging in Ukraine. Or it's Russia that's, it's choosing a path detrimental to arms control, de-escalation, and peace. And
again, it's one of these things that just it's always the infinite present moment. George, what happened to all of the arms control agreements during the Cold War?
Exactly.
Who left them?
Who left them?
Who walked away from them?
That's right.
It was the West that walked away from every single one of them.
That's right. And we should list them as the INF Treaty and the which was, one of the big arms control agreements signed in 1972 by Nixon and Brezhnev in Moscow. And then, of course, there was the INF Treaty agreement, signed by Gorbachev and Reagan in 1987. Two big agreements, which the United States departed from.
And then we could go to the smaller ones like Open Skies.
Exactly. And then it said earlier this month, the United States and Russia announced plans to once again meet under the auspices of the New START's Bilateral Consultative Commission. And then the treaty restricts the number of deployed strategic nuclear weapons to 1,550 weapons each, and was extended until 2026. And then it goes on, while indicating that the new dates will soon be announced, Zakharova said that these talks could not be removed from geopolitical realities. Well, that's kind of what somebody says. Yeah, you can't ignore what else is going on. And this argument appears to be a nod to Russia's real reason for postponing the talks. Its war in Ukraine has gone disastrously wrong, and Moscow seeks to pressure the United States and its allies to decrease support for Ukraine by leveraging the West's obvious interest in the health of a treaty critical to international security. This move is yet another indication of Russia's growing desperation due to its military failures in Ukraine, a dangerous strategy destined to fail. Now, one should say right away that this is something that the Russian leaders, particularly Putin, has said repeatedly. We are not going to talk about what you want to talk about while you ignore the issues we want to talk about. And he said this long before, February the 24th. He's always been saying this, that you want to talk about strategic nuclear weapons because why? Because Russia has taken a lead. And so therefore it's in your interest to squelch any further development of nuclear weapons while you catch up with Russia. That's what you want to talk about. we'll talk about that if you talk about the things we want to talk about, such as the two draft security treaties we presented in December. You didn't want to talk about.
That's exactly what I was going to say. There's some outstanding business, George.
Right.
Yeah. And the current treaty is good until 2026. Okay. Right. These are very difficult treaties to negotiate, but it's still in force. But there's some unfinished business from December 17th of last year. Maybe we can talk about those, which the West dismissed out of hand.
Out of hand. And never published, incidentally, a response. They never published a written response. They didn't even deign to do that. The response that we know about was something that was leaked. Obviously, the Russians leaked their response, but the United States never published, or NATO never published a response.
And what we learned is that some of the officials in the Biden administration that were involved in that, they in passing, they said, no, we never really took it seriously. I mean, it was just a glib. It was of no importance to them whatsoever, as we saw a military conflict building up. So these are the type of people, and saying that Russia is not interested in negotiating right now is the reason is that war in Ukraine has gone disastrously wrong. They're not connected whatsoever.
Not at all. Because even if this were true, it would still have nothing to do with anything. And besides, it goes the other way, because if indeed the war is going badly, wouldn't it be in Russia's interest to, well, let's at least get that off, under the table. So it doesn't make any sense at all. And then to Zaharova's point, a BCC meeting would take place within the context of certain geopolitical realities. Putin's rhetoric around the potential use of nuclear weapons aims to exploit fears about potential escalation to further Russian war aims. Though the saber rattling has died down recently, the mere suggestion that Russia could use nuclear weapons highlights the importance of maintaining arms control dialogue between the United States and Russia, and with all nuclear armed states.
No, the rhetoric came from the West, didn't come from Russia, okay? And it has nothing to do with that loose rhetoric has nothing to do with arms control. It's just apples and oranges.
Exactly. And then arms control agreements are not just about limits on arsenals and mutual verification. They also help maintain channels of contact between would-be adversaries and preserve opportunities of de-escalation. Most bilateral and multilateral agreements include 4R for discussion among the signatories, as well as mechanism to ensure mutual compliance. Examples include the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the INF Treaty. Now, this one we think about. Now, what happened to the INF Treaty? I mean, so again, it just doesn't, that's not even consideration. You walked away from the INF Treaty. That was, a big agreement, and then you walked away from the ABM Treaty. So yeah, I mean that's a good thing. Now, the other thing is that because arms control treaties are part of an ongoing context of détente, then they are indeed interconnected. Remember, when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, Jimmy Carter withdrew the SALT II treaty from ratification. He withdrew it from. It was the Senate was supposed to ratify SALT II, and Jimmy Carter responded by withdrawing it for ratification. So in other words, Jimmy Carter said, hey, all these things are connected. We're not just going to make a fetish of one thing and ignore everything else. So the Russians aren't the first to suggest that, arms control is part of an overall state of security between the two powers.
Yeah, that is a geopolitical reality, as Zakharova said. Okay, but George is absolutely right. Is that the West, again, with this arrogance? This is what we're interested in talking about. Okay, we're interested in this. Okay, we're interested in getting the basketball player out of a Russian prison after she admitted her guilt. Okay, but that's important to us. Okay, no. If you want a tango, you have to have two. Okay, and maybe there's some important things for us. Okay,
Right.
like all this, like maybe our compounds that you stole from us without any legal, actually a gross violation of international law. You know,
Right.
what about these kinds of things? We're kind of interested in these things.
Right. But that's in fact a very good point about the basketball player and this Paul Whelan, is that, well, we want to talk about that. And then, of course, in the media, it's presented, oh, Russia is refusing to discuss, you know, this basketball player. Yeah, because to us, this is a minor issue. You know, we've got much more important things to talk about. But well, we don't want to talk about any of that. We want to just talk about what's important to us for some reason, you know. But you know, why should the Russians play along with this game?
You know, particularly since it's been mentioned here, if you look at the history of these kinds of exchanges, the best policy that has always worked is stop talking about it in public.
Right, right.
Let the process go through, and it will go through. But if you're going to use this as a political weapon, then it's not going to work. Okay,
right?
Because we can just say no.
Exactly, but ultimately it's also that, you know, if they were to release, you know, the basketball player and engage in the swap, you know, this would usually be a signal that other big issues are on the brink of some sort of settlement, and you say, hey, this is, you know, a goodwill gesture. But if other things, the more important issues, are not on the brink of settlement, then this would be meaningless. It would send people the wrong message that everything is hunky dory.
I don't know. You're going to have to correct me if I'm wrong here, but remember the panda diplomacy? It was
the panda diplomacy, exactly.
It was about a breakthrough in U.S.-China relations, and then these pandas show up. It's like, this is a sign, and it was a sign.
It was a sign. Yeah, that's exactly. And then there was also the Danilov case. I mean, there's you know, back in 1986. Remember when that American journalist was released by the Soviet Union? And that was a sign, essentially, for the, you know, few months later, for the big agreements that were signed, the 1987 INF Treaty. So yeah, the case of Danilov, exactly, that's a sign that you know, we're gonna, you know, moving towards a détente. But this, oh, we just want to talk about that, but we're not going to talk about anything else. I mean, that's just a non-starter. It is complete arrogance. And both the United States and Russia have benefited from these 4R. That just so annoys me, that 4R. In the past, for example, at the time it was negotiated, the INF Treaty eliminated an entire class of nuclear weapons, and its consultative mechanism allowed for questions about compliance to be discussed. When this was no longer effective, Russian violations led to the treaty's collapse. Well, alleged Russian violations. I mean, the Russians have their own list of grievances about, you know, American violations. They say these missile systems, these, you know, supposedly defensive missile systems that you have on the border of Poland and Ukraine can easily be adapted into nuclear weapons with a range that falls within the intermediate range nuclear weapons ban. So, you know, they said, yeah, you have violated it just because you call them. Well, this is just a missile defense system. No, but it's still missiles that have the range that falls within this agreement.
Well, this guy bringing up the INF Treaty, I mean, it was the U.S. that walked away from it. Okay, he doesn't say that. Okay,
no, it says Russian violation
led to the treaty's collapse. Okay, but you know, who walked away from it?
Exactly. And the fact is,
and this is a mindset that people like John Bolton have. Any arms agreement ever is something that he wants to destroy, and there are plenty of people like him.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And all of the Europeans who supposedly are so concerned about security, they all went along with it. You know, they said, yeah, fine. You know, they walked away, in NATO, just Russian violation. But then there existed this security mechanism. Or whatever issues you had with Russia, and more Russian issues that you had with the United States, they should have been discussed within this mechanism and sorted out, and it could easily have been resolved. But the United States wanted to walk away from it. It didn't want to use this mechanism to try to resolve these issues. It just simply said, Russia's in violation. That's it. Just simply kept repeating, Russia's in violation, and then just walked away from it.
there was a process worth saving, okay,
Right.
it had inherent value for both sides,
Right.
and it was one side that just didn't want to participate anymore,
Right.
and so to justify withdrawal, they just blame someone else.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
infantile.
It wasn't in America's interest to continue with this, largely because I think they have an interest in deploying these intermediate range nuclear missiles, but in Europe, or certainly in Asia, and they just found an excuse to walk away from it. And then so it's Russia. It's Russia did it. And then in the context of Kremlin's war in Ukraine, both parties stand to benefit from limits of New START on their respective nuclear forces and so on. Additionally, without New START, Russia may have the most to lose in a renewed arms race, considering a renewed arms buildup would likely involve the United States as well as China. So he's very worried about Russia. God, it's these Russians, they just don't understand what's in their interest because, hey, you got China. China's going to be building up its missiles and they're pointed right at you. I mean, Russia, which repeatedly says we have no problems with China. Well, God, you got to worry about them. We want to give you good advice about those dangerous Chinese.
And it's really quite remarkable, the kindness of the writer here, worried about Russia's interests. Thank you. That's really nice to hear.
That's right. That's right.
So magnanimous.
Very magnanimous. Yes, very touching. Yes. And then Russia's recent military setbacks and loss of skilled workers due to the war hinder its ability to compete in a future arms race. God, again, he's being so God. I mean, you feel kind of touched that he cares so much about Russians' inability.
You know who these loss of skilled workers are, George? I don't.
No, I don't either. And it says 350,000 people have fled Russia following the mobilization order. So I looked at that link there, and that linked to a Washington Post editorial. And the Washington Post editorial just said 350,000, but that didn't cite any source for that 350,000. So the link suggests, it's a link, it's somehow been authoritatively established. It's just a Washington Post editorial about the 350,000 who have fled Russia. So.
And he kind of gives it away. Reporting suggests, not confirmed, suggests.
Well, a lot of things can suggest.
Yeah.
And then so. Then it continues, and then he says, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov blamed the postponement of the talks on US officials' unwillingness to take Russian priorities into account. Ryabkov further claimed that the United States was only interested in restarting on-site inspections and unwilling to discuss specifics about the weapons count under New START. Unsurprisingly, this is a red herring from the Kremlin. On-site inspections, which have been paused since the beginning of the pandemic, are not contingent on a BCC meeting and could be restarted without one. And the issue cited by Ryabkov about weapons counts, however, would be among those normally covered at a BCC meeting. So I looked at this link as to what Ryabkov said, and here it says, Russia has protested the deliveries of Western weapons to Ukraine. And then he says, naturally, the events unfolding inside and around Ukraine can impact that. This is the business of why Moscow delayed the talks. Arms control and the dialogue in this sphere can't be immune to what is happening around. And the bigger picture, which is quite complicated and largely disquieting, has played a role. And then he goes on, says, we have repeatedly sent signals to the Americans that their course for an escalation and deeper involvement in the conflict is fraught with grave consequences, and the risks have been rising. Yeah, that's the risk. It's not whether they show up for some sort of a meeting in Cairo, which is this fetishist said, this meeting, that's not the risk. As you said, this goes on till 2026, so there's no great urgency. But there is an urgency when you keep pouring in these arms, and there is indeed, it could indeed end up in a shooting war. And then he talks about this business of the inspections. In August, Russia declared a temporary halt on US inspections, charging that visa restrictions, sanctions on Russian flights imposed by the US and its allies, and other obstacles made it difficult for Russian military experts to visit US nuclear weapons sites, giving the US unilateral advantages. At the same time, Moscow said it highly values New START and held the door open for resuming inspections in the future. Well, he's saying, there's a problem. You want to come over here and inspect our nuclear site, but when it comes to going over there, oh, visa, sorry, we got a sanctions regime. We can't really issue you with visas. So, I can see that might be a problem for Russians if they can't conduct on-site inspections in the United States.
It's so amazing how you went from the responsible statecraft article to this, and very different reasoning. Okay, right. Why doesn't he quote this? He's mentioning the diplomat. Why don't you quote him at length?
Right.
He won't.
Yeah, exactly. And as other voices have pointed out, the clock for a new start is undeniably ticking. Given the state of Russia's economy, its military losses, and international isolation, it would benefit Russia's leadership to rethink its current approach to arms control, reinvest in New START before the clock runs out. And it's all for the benefit for the Russians, because they're going to lose the arms race. It's all the
well, I mean, it looks like from this article, Russia's on the verge of collapse. So I guess we don't have to worry about a new.
Exactly, that's right. Since it's losing, all around, and it's internationally isolated, then hey, why do you care whether they show up for this or they don't show up? I mean, they're just on the brink of collapse.
This is something George and I have said over and over again. Responsible statecraft is just the Democratic Party mouthpiece for the foreign policy blob. It has nothing original to say. It's not countering anything. It's not unique. It's not different. It's the same thing. It is how to maintain hegemony. That's what it's all about. And they just they have a peppering of people that claim to be independent thinking and stuff like that. It's not. It's all the same stuff. It's all same garbage. Sorry.
Exactly. And then they dress it up with nice sounding phrases like, arms control. Oh, we're for arms control. And you get these Democrats. Yeah, arms control. I mean, it's still some sort of some antediluvian sort of thinking. Yeah. Oh yeah. We're for arms control. So, but it doesn't address the fundamental issues.
Well, what it does too is that. Responsible statecraft and the argument that was made in that article, what they're trying to do? We're the reasonable ones.
That's right. Yeah.
We're reasonable. Right. And if we're reasonable on this, we're reasonable on everything.
That's it. Yeah. Exactly. And it's reasonable. And then you do exactly what John Bolton. I mean, how is this any different from John Bolton? Russia's losing. Russia's defeated. Russia's violated its arms control agreements. Russia's lying about why it's not showing up for this meeting in Cairo. But we're trying to, we're trying to help the Russians. We're trying, because
you're always the off ramp. They're always trying to provide an off ramp. Always.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, that's exactly this is classic responsible statecraft. And so, whoa, we're different. We're not one of these neocon war hawks. So please invite us on to a TV show as a different perspective. Because we want, what's that word? Robust diplomacy. We're not just vigorous diplomacy. We want robust diplomacy.
That's the only difference. A word, not intent, not by design whatsoever. Okay, what it is this type of thinking just continues the foreign policy blob's cul-de-sac thinking. It's everything is a cul-de-sac for them. Okay, and it pays well apparently.
It does. You don't address any of the issues. All the ones that Russia has raised. Security agreements in Europe, anything like that. Well, let's just focus on this, and we show, wow, we're for arms control. Wow. Great, we want to sign arms control treaties. Whoa, we believe in a safe world. I mean, no, you're perfectly happy with sending arms to Ukraine and basically continuing this war ad infinitum. But you're in for peace and security because you're for arms control.
Nobody pushes back. That's why they get away with it, George. You get no one. Yeah, I'm for arms control. I like dogs too. Okay, I mean,
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
All right, everybody. That's our take on what's going on here with arms control. Just to reiterate, George and I are big believers in arms control agreements. It's just a pity that the U.S. has walked away from so many of them, and it really gives the Russians a reason to think twice. I mean, you seem to be fundamentally against arms control, but only on this one here. It's very, very strange behavior.
Exactly. And why would we? Why, if for the Russians, why would we think that? That the United States wouldn't walk away from this agreement if it was in their interest to do so. They'd walk away from the next one. They say, hey, Russia's in violation, so we have to walk away from it. So, they want this one, which is clear where the United States has problems, and they've admitted Russia has taken the lead here. So they want an arms control agreement. Anything else? No, we're not interested in that. ABM, they were campaigning against the ABM the moment Reagan came up with that whole strategic defense initiative. I mean, that was back in the 80s. Already they began campaigning against the ABM treaty. It was only because of Gorbachev that they didn't walk away from the ABM
Well,
treaty.
it's interesting. We learned from Larry Johnson, it was very interesting insight, is that, okay, so the ABM treaty goes into disrepair, but then the Russians continued with anti-ballistic missile defense. Okay, there's no treaty against it, okay? Right. Has the U.S. been doing it? No, okay? Right. So, I mean, who lost by walking away?
That's right. Exactly. So.
All right, everybody. This is our update on arms control here. This is The Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on local, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. Please visit our store, and in less than 24 hours, that's right, buddy, George is going to...
Exactly. So Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, please join me for our, live stream on locals. Come with comments, criticisms, suggestions. Everything is welcome. And think about little buddy. He's a big one on keeping your word and signed contracts. He doesn't like walking away from any agreement. So he feels that he committed himself to this to the gaggle, but in exchange he expected a full tip jar. Without it, he might walk away from this treaty. So since we don't want him to walk away from anything,
we don't want him to pull a Bolton. Okay,
exactly. We don't want him to pull a John Bolton. So let's keep him happy. Let's just, if you have a few bob in your pocket, dunk him in his tip jar. That'll satisfy him, and he'll keep it going for another couple of years. So we're very grateful for all of your help and friendship and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can invest in new technology, and above all, the more likely it is that Buddy will stick to these financial control agreements. So remember, if you like The Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.